Welcome to Board Game Casual Design Diaries, a series focused on content about board game design and things and ideas I'm working on as an aspiring game designer myself. Recently, I posted a video on my top 10 favorite game mechanisms, and this got me thinking about one of my favorite games, Champions of Midgard, and how as much as I love this game, I can't help but wonder if a few small design changes to modernize it would make me love it even more. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that Champions of Midgard is in desperate need of change. Like I said, I love it as is, and it's one of my favorites of all time. But let's say they were working on an updated version, or maybe a spin-off game. Well, these are some ideas that I think would be worth considering. So in this video, I'm sharing 2, maybe 3 changes that I would make to Champions of Midgard. Champions of Midgard is a great game with a fun blend of Euro-y worker placement and dice-driven combat. I love that even though this is a competitive game, you're not actually fighting other players. Instead, players are competing to kill the most monsters and other objectives to score the most points. It has one of my favorite game mechanisms of all time, where certain resource spots continue to accumulate or compound resources when the spot goes unclaimed. It's such a fun way for spots that might not be tempting early on to become more valuable as the game goes on. And that fun decision of claiming the spot now or hoping no one else does so that you can claim it later with a bigger reward. My biggest gripe about Champions of Midgard, though, is that especially in a 4-player game, it's a really tight board. In each turn, almost every spot gets taken simply because there's nowhere else to go. And therefore, you never really get to see these spots grow with resources because they're taken every turn. So the first change that I would make to Champions of Midgard is a bigger board with more spots to choose from. The board might not even need to be a physically larger size, it just needs to incorporate more spots to choose from. I find it a lot more interesting when games have way more spots than the amount of workers that actually get placed, versus the same set of spots just being chosen in different order by different players from turn to turn. In a game like Caverna, for example, there's a ton of spaces to choose from, but everyone only has so many workers to go around. By having a larger surplus of spots, there's a better chance of those accumulation spots going unclaimed and actually getting to see those resources pile up over time. Now, of course, the tricky thing is that there are only so many types of resources in this game, between the 3 different types of warrior dice and things like food, wood, gold, objective cards, etc. But I think games like Lost Ruins of Arnak has showed us you can have multiple spots that have the same type of resource. Maybe some just aren't as lucrative as others, or they offer some combination of resources. I'd love to see a space where maybe you roll a die to determine what kind of Viking you'll recruit, or something like that. A bit of controlled randomness could be fun. Or maybe a space that combines an objective card with some resource to make it a little more enticing to go there. But yeah, overall, I'd like more spaces to choose from, ensuring that spaces have a good chance of going unclaimed and giving those specific spots a chance to compound their resources. The second change I think would be interesting probably has a bigger impact to the overall game mechanics. But this is a mechanism I love in worker placement games, and I think would be a lot of fun to incorporate into Champions of Midgard. Worker placement bumping. I love how in Charterstone, for example, you're not limited to only choosing from the unoccupied spaces. If you want a space bad enough that's already taken, you can bump the worker there to take that space. And as a result, the original worker gets returned to that player. So you have to think about how much it's really worth to go there, because ultimately, you're handing that player an extra turn. It's even more exciting to be on the other side, when you get bumped and now you get your worker back and get to take an extra turn. It adds another level of strategy because maybe you're placing your worker on a specific spot that you can see your opponent needs, hoping that you'll get bumped and get to take an extra turn. It's so much fun. I also really enjoy it when you can bump your own workers. Once again, just adding another dimension to the strategy. Now, obviously, not all the spaces in Champions of Midgard should be bumpable. It doesn't make sense to bump someone off of a monster or a ship space, for example. And because in Champions of Midgard, you stock each space at the beginning of the round with its rewards, it would take some thought about what being bumped actually means, since the first player to arrive on the space has already claimed its goods. Maybe each space simply defines some resources that the subsequent players who bump someone else off get to take from the supply. This could simply match what gets put on the space by default, or maybe it's a lesser consolation prize. For example, the first person there gets 2 dice or whatever's on that space by default, but anyone who then comes and bumps them only gets 1 die, maybe something like that. Think how fun it would be if you used one of your workers to collect warriors and then got bumped, and now you can use that same worker to go fight monsters all in the same round. On one hand, there certainly might need to be some balancing to compensate because this would mean that players are gaining more resources each round. But on the other hand, the dice or warriors that you're collecting are expendable. You're going to lose a whole bunch of them every time you go into battle. There's also a fixed number of dice in the game, and only so many each player can hold on their board. So it might actually self-balance a bit and maybe just help speed the game up. By the way, on a related note, I guess if I were to sneak in a third change for Champions of Midgard, I'd love more dice in the game overall, and for players to have a higher maximum number of dice they can store on their player board. I'm pretty chicken going into battle, so I really like sending more than enough dice into combat to help mitigate any bad rolls and ensure myself a victory, and especially combined with the bumping mechanic, it'd be nice to spread my troops out to go fight multiple enemies. So yeah, I believe the current maximum number of dice a player can hold is 8, and I'd love to see this bump to 10 or maybe 12. There you have it, 2 or I suppose 3 changes I would recommend looking into if I were designing an update for Champions of Midgard. First, a bigger or denser board with more worker spots to choose from. Second, adding in a worker bumping mechanism like in Charterstone. And lastly, increasing the number of dice in the game and increasing the maximum number of dice each player can store. Now, I'm sure for a lot of people, the tight board and the worker placement is exactly what they like about the game. And as I said, I absolutely love the game as is. But I also love these mechanisms, so maybe they'd help me love Champions of Midgard even more. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. And hey, maybe there's already a game out there that takes what I love about Champions of Midgard and combines it with these mechanics I'm suggesting. If there is, please let me know, because that definitely sounds like a game I need to check out. That's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for liking and subscribing. And I'll see you next time here on Board Game Casual.